Yeah. Hey everyone, welcome to the live stream. My name is Abdul Chohan. I'm the VP of Learning at Showbie, and I am absolutely delighted to have with me today Mr. P, Lee Parkinson. Welcome, and great to have you with us. So, just kind of a bit of bio on Lee. He's a primary teacher, he's an Apple Distinguished Educator, author, blogger. Provides training for schools, does a lot of inset training nationwide and beyond as well around technology to raise standard across the curriculum. You might have seen him singing and doing all sorts on
attempting to sing.
on Twitter. I've got a friend of mine who has nothing to do with education. I went for a walk with him during COVID, and he goes to me, "Do you know this guy? He came on. He's a teacher and he's singing and he's awesome. He's so funny. If I had teachers like that and so on." And I goes, "Who are you talking about? Who are you talking about?" And then he sent me the link, and it was you.
Yeah, I'm getting in a few places now. Yeah. No, thank you very much for having me. Yeah, it's good to be here.
Oh man, awesome! We kind of met, I think, at that the Windsor event, the Apple Distinguished Educators, I think, event some years ago. And you're actually not that geographically far from me as well. But it's good to kind of catch up like this. So I tend to find, Lee, that this 30 minutes kind of goes really quick. So I wanted to just to start off with a little bit about yourself. Tell us about your background, how did you got into education, and how did you end up being Mr. P?
Yeah, well, I've been a primary school teacher for 14 years now. I've always worked at my school, Davy Hume Primary, since I was an NQT. Love the school, absolutely adore it, the staff, the kids. And yeah, I mean, my career was heading very much down a leadership route to begin with, and it was when we had the kids. So I've got 10-year-old triplets, and yeah. So when they came up, which was completely,
there must be some stories with that, Lee, but I might ask you about that later on. But go on.
yeah. And so that obviously completely changed everything. And my head teacher, as a great leader, always looks at developing you, and he knew that I was then going to be looking at going to headship or deputy onto headship eventually. And so he gave me the opportunity at the time, which I now reflect on, and I don't know whether it was to actually support me or he knew I wasn't going to be able to sleep for the next year or so. So he sort of brought me out of the classroom and then allowed me to cover PPA across the school, because at that point I'd only been a Key Stage 2 teacher, and he felt it was a good way of me getting experience that and really focused on developing my subject, which was ICT at the time. And I was up for it. But what I wanted to make sure we invested in some decent tech, because I think at the time we had a computer suite that had half the laptop or half the computers working. So that was the point where we got a class set of iPads, and my role was just exploring ways in which this technology can support and enhance learning. I was then sharing everything that we were doing, all the ideas of how I was using it through my blog, which then extended to Twitter and Facebook. And sort of a year on from that was where I was getting requests to do training sessions, inset, CPD. And I was lucky enough to have Alan Pete, who's a very big sort of English trainer. He's retired now. He's enjoying his well-deserved retirement. And he sort of put me under his wing and helped me and supported me in creating my own business. And then I made the decision to sort of go part-time, because I never wanted to leave the classroom fully, because I do enjoy it. And I do think it's important, if you are going to go around schools and sort of, advise. And the thing for me is I never see myself as an expert or, anything that I ever know about technology has mostly been self-taught. And I think what a lot of schools like with my stuff is, I come very much from the viewpoint of being a teacher. So, I now visit schools all over the UK. I run CPD sessions, inset training, just looking at how creative technology can really enhance the curriculum. So that's me, where I'm sort of up to now. So yeah.
Good stuff, good stuff, good stuff. And I think like that is always that kind of that point, right, where you're getting people asking you to kind of show them how to do certain things and so on. I kind of remember being in that position, and then you've also got a foot in the school and the job to do there as well, and that's always kind
Yeah.
of the tension, right? Why do I do this, and do I go part-time and so on? But I think that like having that impact in schools, showing them the possibilities, opening doors, is potentially high impact stuff, because people walk away with ideas, and the ability to do things. And sometimes you just don't know what you don't know. So having somebody in and kind of showing you the ideas is pretty impactful. What do you find, like, when you just generally, and not like specifically, but what do you find are kind of like the biggest barriers, like in the UK, when you go to
Yeah.
schools, when you see technology? What do you find like the biggest barriers to kind of actually enabling the use of technology for learning?
A massive one is always sort of budget and schools being expected to do more with less. I think if you were to look at the funding in schools over the past few years, it's absolutely ludicrous, and it really does wind me up when you're then seeing how much money is being wasted on a test and trace system that doesn't flipping work. So budget is always a tough one. And it's other things. So teacher confidence, I feel, is a big one. Teachers are absolutely incredible, but they tend to be reluctant. With some teachers, you can't change the habit of a lifetime. So trying to get teachers to step outside their comfort zone, and I completely get it with the pressures and expectations. It's sort of like, well, I know this works, and it might take me hours to do it, but I know it works. I'm going to stick with this, rather than looking another way in which you can do it, which is going to save you time in the long term. But in the short term, you're going to have to put a bit of effort in to familiarize yourself with it. And I think this is where, the pandemic, as hard as it's been, as challenging as it's been for everyone involved in education, and I think, we'll all admit it's been probably the most challenging part of any of our careers. I do think there has been some positives to come from it. So for like us, who for years have been trying to promote the use of technology, the pandemic has been the point where a lot of schools who for a number of years have maybe neglected it or not seen the true benefits of it have had to embrace it. And I feel like if you're using the correct tools, if you're using the right software, apps, that sort of thing, you really saw the benefit, and you saw how it's never going to replace having the children in class with you.
Of course not. Of course.
Definitely lots of ways in which it can help you do your job more effectively or efficiently, but also supporting children in lots of different ways. Going back to my triplets, my two boys, I've got two identical boys and a girl, and my two boys are both dyslexic, so they really struggle with certain aspects of their reading and writing. And at times it really does frustrate me that dyslexia, for example, is can be such a huge barrier to learning in 2021, when it just doesn't need to be. When you've got the technology in your fingertips that provide ways in which children can demonstrate and share their learning in other ways apart from note it down on a piece of paper, that should be something as teachers we are actively valuing and promoting. And I'm hoping for a lot of schools coming out the other side of the pandemic now, if they've been using the right tools, if they've seen those benefits, because the best tools to use were the ones that obviously supported learning through remote teaching, but then actually now we're back in class, we can still use them, and they can still have an impact. So, I'm hoping. My fear with education, especially in England, is I've already seen it with some schools. Oh, well, that was just something we did with remote teaching.
Go back to what it was.
Yeah. And here's the thing. It wasn't brilliant before the pandemic. The pandemic hasn't created this recruitment and retention crisis we've got in this country. that's been there for years. So we probably look at pre-COVID times now with rose-tinted glasses, but it's like, look, we were still struggling then. The pandemic made it worse, but we were still, you know, so if anything, we've almost got this opportunity as a profession to press the reset button on certain things and say, well, that wasn't working before. This new tool that we're using can help us achieve that quicker, more efficiently. Let's do it. Because this reluctance of, you know, with a lot of schools, what I found is when they do embrace a new piece of technology, they don't allow it to replace what you were doing before. And so in a lot, so that then increases the workload and sort of making things. So that's where teachers are then like, well, I'm not going to do that, because it's take the example of exercise books and printing and evidencing stuff to go in exercise books. Why would any school be expected to still do that now is beyond me. Like I cannot understand.
I know.
Why.
Oh man, Lee, you're talking my language there, mate. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You know,
what time is it now? 4:45. There'll be teachers who are stood at a photocopying copier, printing, trimming, and then towel, sticking it in a book. Why?
I know.
You know, when you've got tools that the kids themselves can take pictures of and evidence, you know, it just you're getting me going now.
I know. I can feel it. I can feel it. You know what? So today I've been at St. Bartholomew's Academy, St. Bart's Academy in Stoke, right? And we've had the trust, we've had head teachers there, and you know, funnily enough, that's the conversation. That's been part of our conversation. So we looked at the EEF kind of research on feedback and so on, and we were kind of superimposed like technology elements on there. And obviously, like we were looking at it from a Showbie perspective, but we've got like voice notes in Showbie. And I said exactly that. Like the kids can write pen to paper in books. That doesn't need to stop. But you can scan, upload, and everything else from there on. The teachers can annotate, use voice notes, and so on. And when we walked around the classrooms at St. Bart's, I mean, you saw children from year 1 upwards, absolutely fluent in kind of doing that. They're able to talk about their learning. They're able to speak about it. You could see how, from an accessibility perspective, it would meet the requirements on a variety of different levels that are much more than just kind of teachers having to take pen to paper. And when the school did their presentation, they were very, very articulate in how they had taken that step of they're not going to mark in books. The children will write in books, they'll upload it, and then they'll be using technology to be able to kind of give feedback and annotations and all of that. And the richness of that is something that goes far beyond, like just to be able to speak to a student and give a voice note when they're not even there, or just to be able to add a little video clip and an explanation, right? These things are, we're kind of here. It's already here. The tech exists, right? But that workflow is not there. And just on another point that you mentioned about, you know, the blocker in terms of funding, that's something that's a major kind of stumbling block, I think, here, because really it should be in the funding formula for schools. Like, you know, that it shouldn't be a question, should we or shouldn't we? I mean, you're right about the pandemic. It's definitely accelerated things. Countries like Singapore have made announcements of one-to-one programs. Austria is doing a one-to-one program. I think the Nordics were already kind of there before the pandemic as well. But more recently, I went to Glasgow, and there, that you feel it in the classroom, you feel the change. So it's not that, hey, it's technology or traditional. It's an amalgamation of both. They're using technology to create operational efficiencies for the teachers and all that printing and trimming and all of that time. You know, teachers are actually able to say, you know what, it's actually made a difference from that perspective. So totally with you on that one.
Yeah, and I mean, it needs to be discussed, and we need to get a better system where technology is provided for schools rather than coming out of the budget. Because, you know, I come across so many schools where the budget's already tight enough, and if they've only got a fraction of money, what they'd rather have is they'd rather have, you know, a selection of as many devices as they want, but not necessarily the best devices. So it's that, you know, it's got to be provided in a way where you're providing decent kit to schools so they can then make the most of it. But just going back to the point about feedback, because this is something I talk about all the time. So you know, a lot of my training will focus on enhancing the curriculum through creative technology. That's always at the heart of everything I do. But that can only take place if teachers have time, build their own confidence and knowledge. So what I've learned over the past few years is if teachers don't have time, no matter what I do on a training day or no matter what they get access to, they're never going to make the most of it because they're never going to have time to do it. So I do a lot of work on sort of just getting teachers to reflect and schools to reflect, because it's got to come from all levels, not just teachers themselves. It's got to be sort of top down, you know, working smarter, not harder. So I honestly believe you can be a really, really effective teacher and have a decent work-life balance. But I honestly think that is something you can do. And it doesn't obviously feel like that at the minute with obviously everything that's going on with the pandemic, because outside of education, it's almost like it's back to normal where it's still affecting schools a lot. And obviously Ofsted and their agenda at the minute is causing a lot of unnecessary stress and pressure on schools.
I know. I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just, I mean, I could spend the next half an hour slagging them off, but you know, I'd rather make it more a productive chat. But you know, when it comes to feedback, I can, if you were to ask every teacher on this planet what is the best form of feedback, every single teacher would reply with oral verbal feedback, right? We know this. Every teacher, every school staff member knows this. Right. So if that's the case and every teacher knows that oral verbal feedback is the best form of feedback, why in the world does some schools still have a marking policy? Because
it's and the answer is probably what you mentioned earlier on, right? Ofsted. They probably feel that we need to evidence it for that and so on. And it's the wrong reason, right?
It's the wrong reason. And ultimately, Ofsted have made it clear for I'd say for the past 8 years, and I'm not going to defend them, but they've put numerous documents out to say they don't care how you do things.
Absolutely.
They will say you've got a mark, you've got a plan, that's down. But that message, for some strange reason, has not trickled down to the people at the chalk face. And so
there was you're right. There was a myth-busting document. There was a myth-busting document that Ofsted put out, and they actually made it very, very clear in there that they did
everything in the power. And you know, and that's now built into the inspection framework. A lot of those myths are built into this new inspection framework. So you know, the reason I think schools have, because for me, if you've got a feedback policy. Right. Okay. Well, it depends what's in that feedback. But if you've got a marking policy, you're not giving feedback, because 99%, because it's two separate things, marking feedback, two separate things. So 99% of marking, which is one of the most time-consuming things teachers do, 99% of it, teachers know full well it's not for the children. It's not. It's for whoever's picking your books. So this is why teachers get so frustrated about workload, and this is why it always seems like teachers are moaning and being, you know, because here's the thing, with a lot of other professions that are high pressured professions, like if you're a surgeon, you know, before you choose to do that job or train to do that job, it's going to be highly pressurized. And you get, whereas with teaching, no one knows what it's actually like, and the ridiculous expectation and pressure until you're in it. And what frustrates me as a teacher, and I'm sure I speak on behalf of, is that most of the work we have to do outside of school has absolutely no impact on the teaching and learning in the classroom, hence marking. There are still some schools where you've got a mark with like 5 different highlighters, because if the page doesn't look like a unicorn's defecate a rainbow all over it, that's not following. You know, it's nonsense. Absolutely. And the interesting thing is, Ofsted, from what I'm hearing, when they go in schools, not even looking in books anymore. It's all about talking to the children. So now schools, rather than saying, right, okay, well, let's look at giving more effective feedback orally and trusting teachers. No, teachers, we're still going to expect you to do all of this marking. But now on top of that, you've got to do all this subject-specific deep dive nonsense. So it's just, and then So in an ideal world, being able to sit with every single child in your class and give oral feedback would be dreamed of. Unfortunately, there's one of us 30 children, but that's where the technology can make the difference.
Absolutely.
That
Absolutely.
can be in 30 places at once.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
you know, there's lots of different ways to do it. Whole class feedback, all that.
Absolutely. And the thing is, you're right. Technology. We live in a time where that has become, actually the technology's become simpler. If you tried to do that 10 years ago, you'd have probably struggled, or, you know, it'd be very difficult. You'd be kind of doing a lot of technical stuff and so on. That's no longer the case anymore. The degree of simplicity and reliability already exists. I mean, there's people using voice notes and things like that on their mobile phones, on WhatsApp and stuff like that, just speaking into it because it's just quicker, you know, and so on. And there's no reason why, you know, that can't filter down. I mean, the heartening thing is that I have seen some schools, not very many, some schools build those things now into their policies. So they're beginning to say, actually, you know what, we're not going to be marking in books. We are going to be giving feedback. We're going to focus on the quality of that. It's going to be voice notes, whatever it is, and so on. And they're building that. So I am beginning to kind of see that, but it is very much ahead of the curve kind of stuff. And I totally agree with you that, you know, we can't, the profession can't continue in this way when there's no reason for it to be done in that way. You know, still taking books home and papers home to mark and so on. That's highly kind of pressurizing. And then work scrutinies and book scrutinies. Again, technology's got a role to play in that.
I'll just say this quickly. Anyone listening to this, if your school does book scrutinies, you cannot be teaching a broad and balanced curriculum. It's as simple as that. Don't even at me or anything like that. It's as simple as this. If the only way you evidence learning is through an exercise book, you can't be teaching a broad and balanced curriculum, because you can't evidence half the curriculum in an exercise book. So again, having tools where you can evidence learning, where, you know,
video, audio, all sorts of other things.
Oral speaking, the first part of every every year group's English curriculum, all these oral speaking objectives, for the past 10 years, most schools haven't even bothered to teach them. Why? We can't stick it in a book. But that's the most important part of the English curriculum. If you're not nailing that, you're not getting anything else. So, you know, you've got to be looking at the bigger picture. And at no point am I suggesting teachers are being any less effective or a shortchanging children. It's just looking at ways this technology now, which, as you say, is so easily accessible, so simple to use, can replace what we were doing before that consumes so much of our time, so that time can be used to then plan and embed the best possible curriculum we can teach. And the thing to mention as well, and what tends to be a barrier with a lot of schools, is the problem with technology is it makes our lives so much more convenient. Like, you know, I could order a pizza now on my phone and it'd probably be at my house before we finish this conversation. Like the instant gratification we get from technology, or can sometimes have the negative consequence of, when we don't see the immediate impact of implementing these ideas, it's like, oh, well, we'll go back to what we're doing. But with a lot of schools, it's not about the technology, it's about the people. And so we've got to invest in them. We've got to give them the time to build up the confidence and knowledge, because it's never going to be an overnight thing. If you're going to roll out a program like Showbie, like CESE, whatever it might be, it's not going to be an overnight thing. It's going to take a while. And I think we don't always appreciate that, because everything's got to be instant. Everything's got to be immediate success, which is what technology, the mindset technology is almost created. So we've got to be aware of that, in that it's a teacher thing. It's not a tech thing. It's a teacher thing.
Absolutely. And I think like that, having that vision and all that kind of stuff beforehand, it's kind of quite key, right? Because quite often, you know, you end up like people putting in the technology, and this has happened so many times, but they've not really thought about what is it that they want to do with it? What is it that they transform? What are they not going to do anymore? Usually the question is, what are we going to do with it? I'm asking schools to think about, what are you not going to do anymore because of the technology that you've put in? What are the things that you're getting rid of?
And,
you know,
and what can we do now with this technology that we couldn't do before?
Yeah,
that's
so the line.
That's the
line. Absolutely.
The ability for children. So, like today, I'll just give an example. Great Fire of London. Now, the sort of typical sequencing activity is the children will get a worksheet. They'll then cut out each event and they'll stick it in the right order. There are plenty of teachers, that sort of worksheet approach. So what we did this afternoon was the children were able to upload the pictures onto a canvas, digital canvas, where they were able to record their own voice explaining the key events. And again, not only is that allowing them to express their understanding of this knowledge-rich, broad and balanced curriculum, which I find rich when it's like in a lot of schools, but you can only show that understanding in one format on a piece of paper. You're removing barriers. So there were some children that year 2 class had the understanding, but wouldn't have been able to get it down on paper. Whereas now they're able to talk it through. They're able to explain. They're going above and beyond the basics because they've got the freedom to. And we've got these lovely sort of interactive timelines almost that you wouldn't have been able to do on paper a few years ago. So it's not just looking at necessarily substituting what we've always done. It's what can we do that we couldn't do before, and how can that support?
Lee, just a couple of weeks ago, it might have, I think it was a couple of weeks ago. I did a live stream with John Hattie, and there's one particular statement that stuck in my mind, and that was what you've just said. About the voice notes and so on. He said that it allows us to hear the thinking. That whole metacognition piece, do the kids actually get it? The ability to hear the thinking is actually quite key. And I think that's the kind of stuff that you can sit there for hours reading comments and, green pens and purple pens and all that kind of stuff. But it just will not give you the clarity of thinking that you can hear when students use technology effectively. So absolutely, completely. We could kind of go on with this for quite a while, actually, because I'm absolutely on board with what you're saying. But I've just looked at the time and it's been 30 minutes already. That was like pretty super quick.
Where does the time go? I mean, one last thing from me, just going back. I mean, technology or not, whatever it is, the one thing we need to make sure we give teachers is trust, because I think that is the one issue. Because workload's still a massive issue. Most of that is down to the fact that we don't trust teachers to do the job. So teachers are constantly having to chase the tail to prove that they're doing the job. So many of them are capable of doing. Look at the incredible job teachers done throughout the pandemic, where they were given one night to completely change the way in which they work. And yes, some did better than others. It was it was challenging in some different schools.
That was
huge. Teachers have done is they've proved how hardworking and dedicated they are. And at the very, very least, and this is coming from the government, the DFE, I said, all teachers want is trust, because by being trusted, they're not going to be wasting time on faff. That time can then be utilised to teach us. And then you've also got the well-being issue that comes into it. I don't want the gestures. I don't want a yoga session, this, that, and the other. I just want to be trusted, so I have time to do what I know works best for me. So, if we can,
absolutely,
decide technology or not, it's like, let's just aim to give teachers the trust they deserve.
I think that, when certainly in secondary schools, when GCSE exams didn't happen, that was very telling, right? When teachers, they had to take teacher judgments. The lack of trust was very evident at that time. And I've been saying to people that the results that came out at that time are probably more realistic, because the teachers have been looking at the children's work over time, and they know their children, and you can trust that probably more than just sitting a 1 hour exam and making a life kind of decision on a grade that pops out at the end of that. So absolutely agree with you on that. I think that globally, when we first started, doing webinars. When COVID first hit, we were doing like we were having 500 people on a webinar, and we were doing 6 webinars a day, and that went on for weeks. And it was just teachers from all over the world, and all you saw was passion, hunger, people that wanted to kind of make a difference for the children. I saw teachers in Africa trying to figure out how to use mobile phones to kind of run remote lessons and so on. Stuff they didn't need to do, but they did, because this kind of job, it attracts people that are passionate about learning and passionate about their children, and they'll go 100 miles to kind of make that happen. And that's something that we've seen. So completely agree with you on the whole trust thing. That's something that definitely needs to happen. I think like the articles that I like reading is, Jeff Barton from Haskell. He kind of writes really good stuff around that, about teachers and so on. And I think there's some very realistic things that we should be able to take away from those things as well. Lee, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
30 minutes flown by.
It's nice. I feel like I got a lot of my chest there. I feel sort of therapeutic.
It's a therapy session. We'll do it again sometime.
Absolutely, mate. Absolutely.
Absolutely. I hear you, man. It's kind of funny, but if there's anybody from St. Bart's Trust that's listening to this now, they'll kind of be hearing echoes of the conversation that we've had and the sessions that we've had today. But it's absolutely true. Let's hope that, school by school, one person at a time, we kind of get to make a difference and continue with the change. Lee, thank you so much. Thanks for your time. Really appreciate you coming on.
Cheers, mate. Thank you. Take care.
Cheers.